Hello everyone and welcome to Book Bubble. My name is Rachel and I'll be your host today. I'm a librarian at the Arlington Public Library and today we're going to hear a story called Pew Sautee and the Four Great Beasts. It's a traditional story from a country called Burma. We also have a special guest here today who just visited Burma recently, and she's here to share some of the wonderful things she learned while she was there. All this and more coming up on Book Bubble. Welcome back. I'm here with my friend Magdalena, who just came back from Burma a couple of weeks ago.
Mingalapar.
Mingalapa. Magdalena, since you just traveled there, do you think you could show us on the globe where Burma is?
Oh yes, of course, Rachel. We're here in the United States. We go across all the United States, Pacific Ocean, and here is Burma.
Wow, that is a really long way to go.
It is.
Now, Burma actually has two names. It's also called Myanmar, so you might hear us use both names today. Well, the story that I'm going to tell you is called Pew Sautee and the Four Great Beasts, and it was actually my mother's favorite folktale growing up, so I'm really excited to share it with you today.
Oh, thank you.
Well, let's get started. Many, many years ago, the gods and people and nature lived in complete harmony. Huge magical beasts roamed throughout space, and the gods fell in love and gave birth to men. The sun god and the dragon princess fell in love across a universe of stars. When they married in a beautiful ceremony in the sky, comets raced in a dazzling lightning dance around them, and the velvet black sky wrapped around them in a loving embrace. Soon after, the dragon princess laid 3 shining golden eggs. They doted over their eggs nestled in the sky, eager for their precious babies to hatch into magical humans who would lead the world of men on earth below. But a terrible thing happened one day when the eggs were nearly ready to hatch. While the sun god and dragon princess slept, a hunter snuck into their celestial palace and stole their 3 precious eggs. He fled back down to earth, but as he hit the green grass, one egg fell out of his knapsack and cracked. Out of it spilled a shimmering rainbow of gemstones that poured into the earth's caves and rivers where they can still be uncovered today. The sun god and dragon princess woke later and discovered their missing children. Despairing, the sun god flashed a glare in the hunter's eyes, causing him to trip and drop another egg near the cool den of a kind peacock. This peacock would come to love and nurture the egg until it hatched into a beautiful woman who would grow into a fair and just queen in the country that raised her. But that is a story for another time. This story is about the last egg, still jiggling in the hunter's knapsack as he tried to flee the grief of the sun and the moon and the stars. The dragon princess, devastated at losing her children, breathed a wall of fire in front of the running thief, who threw his arms over his head to protect himself from the heat. As he did so, a wonderful thing happened. The egg slid gently out of his knapsack and into the warm, smoothly drifting river. As the hunter ran, the egg felt the tender strokes of the river goddess, who loved the sun god for giving warmth and light to her underwater creatures and plants as it washed down the river. Cradled by grasses, feathers, and the soft gold silt that the river goddess cupped around it, the egg eventually came to rest in the holy town of Bagan in Myanmar. A woman with a kind face happened to be washing her clothes in the stream when she noticed the large egg that seemed to burn with the light of the stars. She lifted it and carefully carried it back to the small hut that she shared with her husband. Now this husband and wife were a generous and kind pair, though they were never able to have children of their own. Instead, they cared for their small patch of squashes and pepper plants, their shady orchard of banana and mango trees, and their little pen of plump chickens and golden-eyed goats. So when they found this strange egg the size of a large pumpkin, they wrapped it in the soft wool of their goats, tucked the warm feathers of their chickens underneath it, and laid it near a small fire to keep it warm. Each day, for months, they checked on the egg, stroking it affectionately each morning when they awoke, and cooing to it softly each night before they went to bed. One day, as they were getting ready for bed, the hard shell cracked open, revealing a small, beautiful baby boy. The woman cradled the boy in her arms as the man looked at them both, a broad smile on their faces. They called him Pew Sautee. The couple raised the boy as if he was their own, realizing early on that the boy was both kind-hearted and very bright. When his intelligence started to outshine even the couples, they happily sent him to a tutor, Yade Chao, to continue teaching the boy about the world. For years, they lived peacefully. Each morning, Pyu Sati would help his parents tend to their small farm. In the afternoons, he would walk to the monastery, where Yade Chan would give him lessons until the sun god set the sun in the west, casting a warm light on his only son's face. But such idyllic times came to an end when Pyu Sati was just 16. One night, while the sun god and the dragon princess slept, 4 terrible beasts came to Bagan. When the sun rose in the morning, the beasts refused to leave, so much did they come to love the land they had invaded. The first beast was a giant bird that blocked the sun so that even the sun god could not force the beast to leave. The second beast, a giant boar, trampled whatever crops were able to grow without the sun. The third beast was a ravenous tiger who hunted the villagers' farm animals. And the fourth beast, a giant rat, spread sickness throughout the village. After weeks of living with these beasts, Pyu Sati asked Yate Chao, "Why are these beasts doing these terrible things to us? What have we done to deserve this? We are a peaceful people." Yade Chan said, "There are things in our nature that we cannot help, Pyu Sati. If you are cold, do you not seek the warmth of the sun?" "Well, yes, teacher, but I wouldn't block the sun for everyone else." "Maybe you would if you were cold enough. And when you are restless, do you not run through the fields?" "Well, sometimes, yes, I do, but I'm always sure that I don't destroy all of someone else's hard work." "That may be so, Pyu Sati, but you do destroy some of it. Who is to say that the one rice plant you smashed could not have fed a family? And when you are hungry, would you not eat the first thing that came to hand?" "Yes, I suppose I would," he said. "But why does a tiger have to eat everything? Does a man not eat more than a child? Perhaps it is just a matter of scale." "But what of the rat, teacher? Must the rat spread disease so?" "Oh, well, if the only place you are allowed to live is in the muck and dirt, then you would be sick with disease too, wouldn't you?" "I suppose. But how do we get them to leave us alone?" "Well, think, Pyu Sati. If you are hungry and you finally have found food, what will it take to make you leave that food?" "More food somewhere else?" Pyu Sati answered, a little unsure. Yade Chan grinned. "Right. Give them something better, Pyu Sati, and they might leave our people alone." Over the next few days, Pyu Sati hardly slept because he could not stop thinking about something better to offer the 4 terrible beasts. Finally, as the sun was just beginning to disappear under the night sky, Pyu Sati had a plan. He spoke to the weavers in the town and convinced them to help him. He talked to the farmers too, and he convinced the king's guard to consider his plan as well. Everyone was so desperate to rid Bagan of the 4 terrible beasts that they all eagerly agreed. It took many weeks of hard work and help from the entire village to get Pyu Sati's plan ready. When it was finally ready, the village had been living with the 4 beasts for nearly a year. That morning, Pyu Sati called up to the giant bird blocking the sun. "Great bird, listen, for we have come to offer you warmth so you don't block the sun," he yelled. The giant bird looked down at Pyu Sati. "How do I know you will not just trap me and send me away?" the bird asked. "Look, great bird, the greatest weavers in all the land have made you a giant quilt from which you can build a warm nest by the river," Pyu Sati answered, waving to the dozens of villagers who stood gripping a giant quilt that shimmered gold and green. The giant bird beat its wings, giving the villagers their first glimpse of the sun in months. It flew down and landed next to the blanket. The brave villagers holding the quilt trembled with fear before such a great bird, but they were kind above all else, and together they folded the blanket into a bundle and let the bird take it in its beak. They waved as the bird flew off and nestled into the meadow by the river. With the sun now shining brightly down on him, Pyu Sati and the villagers went to find the giant boar. This did not take very long, for a giant boar trampling through fields makes rather a loud noise. They found her pawing the ground and lowering her head as if she were getting ready to charge them. "Wait, great boar, please, we mean you no harm. We simply want to find you a place to run freely without trampling our crops." The giant boar seemed to think about Pyu Sati's word and slowly raised her head and stilled her hooves. She said, "You will give me a place to run free?" "Yes, great boar. The farmers have agreed to all give a part of their land so that you may run without being disturbed. No one will harm you. They just ask that you let their crops grow so that we have enough food to eat." The giant boar nodded. "I will not trample your food anymore." She let the farmers lead her to the clearing that they had made for her to run in. She was careful to avoid stepping on their small, struggling plants. She snorted with glee at the sight of the wide open space and ran excitedly around the field. When the farmers returned, Pyu Sati knew it was time to find the giant tiger. He was worried, for tigers are much more dangerous than birds and boars. He watched as the villagers started to pack their bows, arrows, slingshots, and stones, and he felt nervous about what he was going to suggest. He cleared his throat, sounding braver than he felt. "My friends, I understand that it seems wise to bring weapons with us to find the tiger, but I think we must use our words rather than our weapons today. The giant tiger won't trust us if we approach her with weapons, and we need her to believe us for our plan to work." Pusati held his breath as his fellow villagers considered his words. Then one villager, a strong, muscular man, laid his bow and arrows on the ground. "Pusati is right. We cannot ask the giant tiger to cooperate with us by threatening him," he said. When he was done speaking, more people laid down their weapons until they all stood empty-handed before Pusati. "Thank you for trusting me," he said. "Let's go find a giant tiger." The villagers walked into the jungle, not bothering to be quiet, for they could never be stealthy enough to fool a tiger. "Great tiger," Pusati called, "we have come to offer you a job of which you can be proud. It is a task that promises good and plentiful food and much respect." A low growl emanated from the jungle. The villagers looked all around until someone pointed in the trees and said, "There!" Pusati looked where the villager pointed and saw large golden eyes peering down at him. "Great tiger, we come with no weapons in our hands and no treachery in our hearts. You can overpower us easily, yet we stand before you desiring only to talk. Please listen to what we have to offer." The growl came again, but seemed to be softer this time. Pusati took this to be a sign that the tiger was listening. "Great tiger, our village admires the strength and beauty of the tiger. Our king's palace also needs a powerful and loyal guard. The king has promised to grant you much food from his stores. In exchange, all you would need to do is ward off evildoers around the kingdom and to leave the farmers' and villagers' animals alone. The king is especially interested in ridding his kingdom of the giant rat that plagues our people with sickness." Pusati held his breath as the tiger considered. Suddenly, the giant gold and black beast stood before him, having silently and swiftly slid from the tree. It sat back on its haunches and began to lick its paws like a house cat satisfied with a meal. "I think," the tiger said between licks, "that we, lick, might have an agreement." Pusati bowed deeply before the great animal, and the villagers escorted the tiger all the way to the palace gates, where the king stood waiting to bestow the royal shield upon the tiger's head. The tiger then swiftly turned on its large paws and bounded after the rat, chasing it far from Bagan. For what rat would want to be near a terrible, giant tiger paid handsomely to hunt it down? Bagan was back to its old self in no time. The crops grew back under the warmth of the now shining sun. Farmers raised baby chicks and lambs again, and the people were healthy now that the giant rat was gone. The bird nested happily on his warm quilt by the river. The weavers would periodically mend the quilt when it grew worn with use. The boar was content to frolic in her field, and the farmers made sure their crops did not encroach on her clearing. And the tiger purred contentedly each night after enjoying a giant meal fit for a king. The kingdom had never been safer. One warm, sunny day, the king invited Pusati, his parents, and his wise teacher, Yadechao, to a royal supper to celebrate the end of the days of the 4 terrible beasts. They dressed in their finest clothes and traveled to the palace, bowing deeply to the giant tiger as they walked through the royal gates. They feasted, told stories, and laughed with the king and his wife at the palace. At the end of the evening, the king turned to Pusati and said, "You have shown immense bravery, thoughtfulness, respect, and caring to our people and to the 4 great beasts. My wife and I have decided that we would like you to be the next king of Myanmar." Pusati was shocked. "This is a great honor, Your Highness, but Yadechao, my beloved teacher, is the true hero of Bagan. Without his knowledge and skill, we never would have been able to cooperate with the 4 great beasts. And my parents here have taught me all I know about bravery and respect. I am deeply honored by your offer, Your Highness, but I cannot accept. Instead, I will nominate Yadechao for your consideration." It was the king's turn to look shocked, for he could not imagine that someone would turn down such an offer. "I am very moved by your response, Pusati, and I deeply respect your opinion. Yadechao, I would like you to be the next king of Myanmar." Yadechao bowed his head, thinking. Then he said, "I accept, Your Majesty, but on one condition." "Anything," the king replied. "If I am to be king, then Pusati here must be my successor." The king smiled broadly. "As you wish, Yadechao." And so the sun god and his dragon princess watched as their 3rd child, their only son, and his wise, kind teacher ruled the land. Myanmar had never enjoyed such a golden time in its history under the reigns of the teacher Yadechao and his best student Pusati. Well, I hope you enjoyed the story, Magdalena.
Oh, I loved it, Rachel. What a beautiful story.
Oh, good. I'm so glad you enjoyed it. So why don't you tell me about some of the clothes that you're wearing? They look beautiful.
Oh, well, thank you. This is a longi, and this is a typical skirt. Men and women wear it. It's very, very comfortable and very elegant. And for special occasions like wedding, there would be very embroidered and silk ones. That's beautiful.
It is beautiful, and I love the embroidery on it.
Thank you.
Now, in the story, we hear about Yade Chown, who is a monk, a Buddhist monk, or a Ponji, as they call him in Burmese. I hear that you went to a very famous Buddhist pagoda in Burma called the Shwedagon Pagoda. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
The Shwedagon, yeah, it's beautiful. It's a palace. It's so, so nice. It's built upon a very holy hill. And you have all these gold and jewelries, and people come to pray, and people come also to have gatherings. And it's very sacred because the story says that it calls the relics of the Buddha, some hairs of the Buddha.
That's great. Now, you brought this really interesting piece of wood with you, and it smells wonderful. Can you tell us about it?
Oh, yes. This is a Tanaka. And it's from, this comes from a tree that grows in Burma. Women have been using it for centuries to beautify and to cool the skin. And if you want, you can put some of it. We just have to add a little bit of, we already had done before the preparation, grinding. You can just put a little bit of water, just a tiny bit of it to make a paste. And then, if you don't mind, you can put it on me.
Sure. So I just grind it like this?
Yes.
Oh, okay. And I see it's starting to turn into a paste.
Yeah, and it smells so good. It smells like sandalwood.
Yes, it smells wonderful.
And then you can put some for me.
Okay. So, and I put it just on the cheeks.
Yeah, it's so refreshing and cooling. And it protects people from the sun rays.
Well, it smells wonderful. And can you tell us, what was your favorite part about your trip to Burma?
Oh, God. There were so many wonderful things, but the people. Just wonderful, generous people, always smiling. I love them. And I love the food. Oh, they have delicious food.
That's the best part of traveling, I think, is meeting people and having good food.
I agree with you.
Well, thank you so much for joining us here today, Magdalena. And thank you all for joining us here on Book Bubble. We'll see you next time.